Hello, Samuel. Hello, Samuel. Can you see me?
So the word of prayer, and I'll kind of give you a layout of what's going to happen today. All right. Good evening, sisters and brothers. I just want to welcome you to our Advent Town Hall meeting. It's Advent season, and what a great title to have as Advent Town Hall. If you don't mind, I want to begin tonight with a word of prayer. So would you join me in prayers? Gracious God, what an opportunity to be able to connect with brothers and sisters from the East Coast to the West Coast and across the breadth of this country. God, as we just spend time together as sisters and brothers, we ask that your Spirit will be with us in this season of Advent. Grant in us that hopeful expectation that even tonight we will get to know one another, we'll get to kind of share a little bit of what you are doing in our lives in the different communities of faith that will be an encouragement to each other. Thank you, because we ask all this through the name of the one who called us, Christ Jesus our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Michael? Okay, so I will kind of give you a lowdown of what is going to happen, how our outline is going to look like tonight. Today's theme is we too can engage the Advent season with this parable as told by Jesus in Luke chapter 14 from verse 7 to 14. But I'll come back to that particular theme for tonight. And I want to introduce my tech support team. And when I say tech support team, they have worked consistently with me since we began this town hall by making things work possible. Because for people like Anton, Ella, that are in the technology field, you know, when you put up a meeting like this, one person cannot just micromanage everything, at the same time facilitate. So without further ado, I'll have Leslie and Josiah introduce themselves. And once Josiah is done with introducing himself, he'll run through a quick brief orientation in terms of how to navigate this system together. So introduce yourself, team.
Well, maybe I should go first since he's going to tell them about, participating. So I'm Leslie Lake, and I'm from the Polo Church of the Brethren, Illinois, Wisconsin District.
Here it is again.
Hi, everybody. My name is Josiah Ludwig, and I'm the associate pastor at First Church of the Brethren in Harrisburg. And Samuel's asked me to talk a little bit about the platform that we're using tonight in case you haven't used Zoom in the past. One of the things that's going to happen during the meeting is that Leslie has control over the mute buttons. And just so that we don't get a whole lot of feedback from everybody's microphones being open, we're going to mute everybody. And so if you want to speak, if you want to say something, you'll want to physically hit the unmute to speak and then remute yourself after that. One other thing we're asking, if you wouldn't mind, if you're operating on a yourself, and we would like it if you could name yourself with first name at least. Don't need first and last if you don't want to, and either what state or what congregation you're coming from, so we'll know where everybody is. And if you have questions during the time together, I'll be operating off of a cell phone. So if you're doing it with a cell phone or a tablet and you have questions about the interface, you can send me messages directly. If there are any questions on the PC side of things, like if you're on a laptop computer or something like that, you can send a message directly to Samuel in that regard. That's it.
Okay, thank you so much, Josiah. What I was trying to do is I was trying to just take a photo while I was talking, and of course, so I can post it on my Facebook and say happening now, because sometimes people go, oh, it's happening, so it's a visual reminder. If we can all take a minute and do that and post it on your own Facebook that it's happening right now, town hall meeting, and then what will happen is everyone in the brethren world will wonder, what are we missing? So just take a second and do that while we come back. Okay, I have. And I know for those on the phone, I will call on you every so often if we need some comments from you, so that you don't, because you're not watching what's happening. So either myself, Leslie, or Josiah will mention your number. For Dan McFadden, we know we can see Dan McFadden. And okay, I understand. Not all of us are on Facebook. So, and for caller, the call in user number 1, I don't know who that is. If you mention your name, I will rename you. Okay, no answer. Okay, are we back from Facebook for those of us that have Facebook? I had thought about breaking us into different groups, and the idea behind breaking us into different groups is when you have more than 10, 15 people, it is always good to break into smaller groups to introduce yourself and just kind of a little bit share more about who you are, where you're coming from. But from the way I look at the people on the screen here, if we don't mind introducing ourselves to the general group, I think that might be helpful, if that's a possibility. And what I want you to do is I'll post a question of what to introduce yourself, what in the text box, if you are able to do the chat box.
Not able to do that. Who's the first one in line?
Pardon me?
Who's the first one in line?
Okay, I wish this. Now that you spoke, Roland, why don't you get us started?
I was afraid of that.
So you just say your name, your church or district, and one sentence about Advent that you find meaningful and helpful.
Okay, Roland Johnson. I'm the pastor at the Kabul Church of the Brethren, and have been here for 2 years. Following Roger Schrock. I have some fairly big shoes to fill. I think when I think about the Advent season, I always have to remind myself it's not just about Jesus' birth, but it's about Jesus coming again. And the two together, you have to celebrate the fact that Jesus was here and taught us so many positive things, love and compassion. And I wish everybody could understand that, but SARS poorly and they don't. The other thing about it is I actually have a little bit of fun when I start planning the candlelight church, which we're doing this year again. That's enough, isn't it?
Yes, that's good. Thank you so much, Ron. I will go to Anton and the Living Stream Church. the two of you can do it at once, or yeah.
We'll take turns. Judy, would you like to go first?
No, thank you.
Okay. So I'm coming in from the Ambler Church of the Brethren right now, which is one of the places I pastor, but I also help pastor the Living Stream Church of the Brethren. And you asked to say something about Advent. And
Yes, one sentence about Advent that is meaningful to you.
yeah, and what has struck me especially this year is that people don't want to wait for much of anything.
Mm-hmm.
And Advent, I keep being called back to that sense of waiting, the people that waited centuries, that waited millennia for the coming of the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't wait 3 weeks and start playing Christmas songs and Christmas gifts and put up decorations. And well, we can't wait until before Halloween. And so I hope that we can enter as a church, as a community, as a denomination, as a society, to learn what waiting is about again.
Thank you.
And I'm still here in Ambler. I will be starting in January as an associate pastor here with Benton and Mary. And I think the thing that I like the best about Advent is the lighting of the wreath, because it's just starts with nothing and it gets brighter and brighter and brighter the closer you get to the birth. And to me, the symbolism of that is important in my life.
Thank you, Judy. Come I see Rachel? Yes.
Yes, I got nominated to represent our group here. I'm Rachel Gross, and with Beverly Eikenberry and Helen Beery from the Manchester Church of the Brethren, and Kay Geyer, who is pastor at the Wabash Church of the Brethren. And we meet almost weekly to support Kay and her ministry there. And her theme for Advent is working with Mary, who responded, "Yes, let it be." So that's what we've been thinking about.
Thank you. Bruce?
Bruce Rosenberger, near Columbus, Ohio. My wife, Mary Sue, is off to the side here. We share in our local congregation, Live Peace, but we're also on the pastoral team for Living Stream, the online church. For me, Advent is a time to spend some time thinking about those events, those prophecies, those reflections, those expectations that led up to the coming of the Messiah. A lot of the prophecies that we don't often think about the rest of the year merit our attention during the time of Advent.
Thank you, Bruce. Barbara?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, because I'm on Bluetooth here. I'm Barbara Date from Springfield Church of the Brethren in the Pacific Northwest District. Advent for me is about the anticipation of Jesus breaking into our lives again, now, and shining light on the world and on our path to give us guidance every day.
Thank you. I may go to the phone for a break. Dan McFadden, are you with us?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, well, I'm driving, so my apologies. I thought I'd call in and listen. I wasn't expecting to participate much. I've also lost you all a couple of times, so I may come in and out. I'll do the best I can. I'm from the Highland Avenue Church of the Brethren in Elgin, Illinois, Wisconsin district. I've also worked with Brethren Volunteer Service with the national office and with the Church of the Brethren. This last week, we lit the candle of hope in the wreath, and I think of this as a hopeful season, the remembering, of course, of Jesus' birth. And we're at a time in our country and even in our church when we're pretty pulled apart. And I guess the hope is that we can remember what this really is about and be together in our worship and welcoming Jesus into the world.
Thank you. Leroy. I know Leroy wrote something on the screen. Am I correct? No. Okay. Colleen?
Yes, I serve as the district executive for the Pacific Northwest District, Oregon and Washington. And Advent this year for me means I do not have to leave my district for 2 months. It's the only time during the year that I've not had to travel extensively. So it's a time for what Enton was saying, just time of waiting. I just enjoy it. And I'm house sitting for some folks. I have a lovely home to be in for the holidays. So it's really a time of relaxation for me, although I'm busy, but I don't have to travel. So that means a lot, because when I travel as the DE, I have to fly anywhere I go. So it means a lot to me to be able to stay home and slow down, sing with the small quartet that we're singing at Christmas, and enjoy the music and participate in the life of my congregation here in Wenatchee.
Thank you so much, Colleen.
Mm-hmm.
Sandy. Okay. Elaine? I'm kind of going just down the list to see who I have not invited to speak. I know Leroy is from South Central Pennsylvania, Cadoros Church of the Brethren. He said, sorry, I'm not on the phone. So am I missing anyone? Okay, if I'm not missing anyone, let me just give a little bit of a bit of a background for how this particular theme and my longing for the hope that we have as a church. I began by writing, the season of Advent is the beginning of the church's calendar year. It is a time
440 717. Yep, that's 717.
It is a time of spiritual reflection. Okay, I believe everyone is. Leslie, is everyone muted?
I don't know how to do it on my phone.
Okay. Yeah, everyone is muted now. So I'll begin. The season of Advent for me is as we all know, is the beginning of the church's calendar. It is a time of spiritual reflection, preparation, anticipation, and hope. The focus of the entire celebration it's about the birth of Jesus, who showed up a little over 2,000 years ago. And for me, Advent is much more than remembering and celebrating this 2,000-year-old event in history. But it's a celebration of the truth about God in Christ revealed to us. And not only revealed to us, but the hope that in God through Christ, a reconciliation of all of creation back to God. This, as a season of celebration, is a time that people often get invited, or sometimes we send out invitation, or we ourselves are invited to different events and parties. So what should our response be when we think about being a living parable? As I reflect on this, I think about Jesus's pep talk here in this parable. Maybe Jesus's pep talk in the passage of scripture from Luke chapter 14, from verse 7 to 14 might help us. Because before the parable of the banquet, and I'm not going to read that scripture because I want us to kind of have some more conversation today. And before the parable of the banquet, Jesus told a kind of a preamble. I see it as a parable before a big parable, but that's my own eisegesis here. And so Jesus was observing and looking at this scenario where at a banquet, he noticed that when guests arrived for a banquet at a feast, some people chose a place of position, a place of honor. And so Jesus was kind of giving this pep talk to his listeners. And what I see out of it is Jesus is saying, remember, when you are invited for a dinner, in this season take the lowly position of servanthood than the position of power. But towards the end of that few verses of scriptures, Jesus reminded us in verse 13 of the same passage in Luke 7. He says, but when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. And it hit me home so much that when we think about Advent season and the expectation and the celebration, the easiest path for us is to gravitate towards the kind of people that we know can invite us back. Because it's easy to invite fellow peers, people, and there's nothing wrong with inviting your friends and family. But there are people that are out there that we are called to be a living parable, that in our obedience to following Jesus as the Church of the Brethren, that we will be able to be on the lookout for this season, because just as we have hopeful expectation of the return of the second advent of Jesus coming back to reconcile all things, there are many people out there that are longing for sort of a reconciliation to community, reconciliation to families, and reconciliation even to the church body. That even within the wider church, that I don't only invite folks that think theologically or act theologically like me, but I should go out to the highways and the byways and invite folks that might not even, theologically, we might not even agree on anything, but by that act of invitation, an act of being open, and that with the hopeful expectation of Christ showing up to bring reconciliation, that the possibility of reconciliation then get open. And so that being said, I want us to kind of chime in with a couple of conversations from this same passage. Do you want me to give you a few minutes to read the passage, or do you want somebody to read the scriptures, or are you going to read it on your own and have a conversation on this two questions that I have? You can unmute yourself and say something.
What are you telling me?
Samuel, it sort of adds to the meeting, I would think, if you would have either you or someone read it, because hearing the spoken word really helps the scripture.
Leslie, do you mind reading that for me?
That audio is earthly.
Luke chapter 7 from verses 7 through 14. Luke 14, 7 through 14.
No, that audio is earthly. Audio is earthly.
Does somebody have it?
No, you can read it.
I have it. Go ahead.
I do
Leslie,
too.
Leslie, would you mind muting everybody again? And then
I'll be glad to.
Thanks.
This is not too satisfactory, is it?
Well, it seems like they're having some technical difficulties.
Okay, well, I have it, so I'll read it.
Go ahead.
Doesn't seem like anybody is. So, okay, so Luke chapter 14, verses 7 to 14. And Jesus eats at a Pharisee's house. Jesus noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, So he told them a story. He said, "Suppose someone invites you to a wedding feast. Do not take the place of honor. A person more important than you may have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you will come to you. He will say, 'Give this person your seat.' Then you will be filled with shame. You will have to take the least important place. But when you're invited, take the lowest place. Then your host will come over to you. He will say, 'Friend, move up to a better place.' Then you'll be honored in front of all the other guests. All those who lift themselves up will be made humble, and those who make themselves humble will be lifted up." Then Jesus spoke to his host. "Suppose you give a lunch or a dinner," he said. "Do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, or your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you to eat with them, so you will be paid back. But when you give a banquet, invite those who are poor. Also invite those who can't see or walk. Then you will be blessed. Your guests can't pay you back, but you will be paid back when those who are right with God rise from the dead."
Yes, and I like the free for all chiming in, because I want this to be very organic, and organic in the sense that you feel like you have something to contribute. You just say that I don't have to go down the list and call people. You can raise your hand if nobody's talking, and you can unmute yourself to speak.
Right.
The two questions that I have, I will post on the chat screen, is what do you think is viewed in higher regard in our time? The person who starts out sitting in the lower place, or the person who invites that person to move higher, and why? It's sort of, what do you think is valued in our time higher? And you don't have to answer both, or you can answer one of the two questions. The second is, what has our culture taught us about this scenario that Jesus painted in this wedding banquet? The first question is, what do you think is viewed in a higher regard in our time? And the second part to that question is, the person who start out sitting in the lower place, or the person who invites the person to move higher? And why do you think so? And the second question is, what has our culture taught us about this scenario? And right in the time that we've just passed a law, what do you call it, that we're passing, we just passed, I'm blanking, the tax reform. So feel free to chime in, and it's free for all.
I don't know how the rest of a gathering would perceive the situation, but putting myself in the place of one who is invited up from a lower position, it always feels good to be invited up, particularly, I'm sure, if that person chose that spot out of a self-negating perspective. But anyone who is seated at that distant or lowest seat, who is invited up front by the host, is given a sense of honor.
Mm-hmm.
I thought your question, Samuel, was really interesting. Which of the actors is viewed more highly? Mm-hmm. The one who is invited to move up, or the one who does the inviting?
Mm-hmm.
It was neat to see that in your email. And so, bouncing off of where Bruce was, it's clear that whoever has the authority to do the inviting, mm-hmm. is clearly in the they're in the driver's seat. They clearly have more authority than anyone else there, because they're the one who's doing the controlling. Mm-hmm. But I think especially the context of our society here in the U.S. and the politics that are going on, this is not the kind of parable that people would want to hear in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And so you wouldn't want, it's kind of slipping into your second question as well. You wouldn't want to be the person sitting down low, because if it's yours, you should go and take it. And you shouldn't have to sit lower. I can't imagine our elected leaders wanting to sit in a lower place right now. At the same time, how can we share the privilege, whether it's white privilege, whatever privilege it might be, and invite others up into our space, was where I take that question.
Thanks, Anton. It's Rachel smiling to say something.
This is Beverly.
Oh,
I'm four. Rachel's one of four.
Yeah.
I appreciated your insight in that, and I was waiting for somebody to give more wisdom than I had. But I thought it was pretty clear that the one who was doing the inviting would have more of the power, so to speak. But it seems like in our culture now, there is also something that was not even mentioned here, and that is how the invitee responds to the invitation. And it seems like there's a lot in our culture now about somebody being invited either to move back or to move forward and saying, nope, I'm staying right here. So I just wanted to say that was a thought of mine. Thanks.
Thank you. And those of you that do not have camera, you can just, we can't see you, you can just chime in and start talking. If those of us that can see you start talking, we'll just, step back. So you two can have an opportunity. Yes, Barbara. Unmute yourself, Barbara.
Barbara, your phone is muted. I don't know if, Leslie, you can unmute call-in user number 1. That would be Barbara's phone.
Oh, okay.
I can't.
I was able to
I
speak
did.
before.
I did.
Okay. Oh, magic. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you guys.
What? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Fabulous. Barbara. What came to mind was when I was teaching in Canada as a visiting professor, I was invited to and honored to speak at conferences and give presentations and everything, even about topics that I knew nothing about. And I decided to always say yes, thank you. And then what I did was I would invite, if it was, and most of the time it was about topics that had to do with Native people. They use the term Aboriginal people. And so I would invite like 2 or 8 of my Native students to come and help with the presentation and participate in it and get it on their resumes, and other students who were studying issues regarding dominant culture and Native peoples. And I began to share with other people about why I was making that decision, because in Canada, as other places, but let me pick on Canada here, that they are very tolerant of other people and other cultures, except not for Native people, that they're the most discriminated against in Canada. And when I was there, because I looked Native, I was really rudely and constantly discriminated against. It was really harmful to my health. And but I decided to, if I was given a privilege and given honor, then what I did was I brought other people who didn't have that access, and then I gave them the floor to share from their lives. And I've used that way of thinking quite often since then, but that was my lesson in thinking about this topic.
to piggyback on what Barbara just said, I don't want to, I'm trying not to be, I want to moderate rather than pontificate, because the tendency is for me to get up here and just talk your ears out. But I feel I need to chime in a little bit on the comment from Barbara. As somebody who is a minority in our denomination, I want to say that I see this really lived out in ways that I have been invited and given a space, a place of honor in a very subtle way. And I wish that as a denomination, we will continue to be, we have an open arms, that we do it knowingly or unknowingly, but by our intent of really wanting to be hands and feet of Jesus, that we will, this will become just part of who we are. And so I just wanted to echo that. And as a result of that, I have learned that the platform that all of a sudden somebody gave me their shoulder to stand on, I have the same honor and privilege that I should avail my own shoulder for others to be able to stand on as well. So enough of that. I will give others the opportunity to chime in. Funa made a comment. I'll read her comment and then I'll wait for Funa to make a comment if she needed to say something. She said, with humility, being a servant leader while holding the highest position, in my opinion, of course, is doable. Funa, you're welcome to chime in, or otherwise somebody else can make comments.
Good evening, everyone. I am with my little one, so he's screaming, so that's why I mute myself. I was answering to Leroy's question about what the culture allows us to hold the highest position. And I think from what I understand what he said is when we are on that highest level, we always think of others as lesser than, and we give ourselves that mental authority that God did not give us. And if we keep that standard, it is hard to be the one doing the inviting because others will see us as pretentious or arrogant, and that is not Christ's way at all. Which is why I made that comment with humility. And I can add wisdom to it as well. Barbara, so nice to hear from you.
Thank you, Funa.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any further comment? Okay, I will move the conversation a little bit forward. In the previous calls, what I've done is I have tried to approach people to, I always like having a brethren parable. And you will hear this repeated at conference in Cincinnati as well. Because the theme of our conference is living parables. So what I try to do is bring in stories of people that are already being a living parable. And sometimes their stories are stories that you don't hear because they don't have the big microphone. They don't have, it doesn't come with all the fanfare. So in the first week, we heard from, first month, not first week, we heard from Harrisburg First, just how much God is using them to bring transformation in their community. And I could testify because I have been there prior to the development that I've seen happening in that neighborhood now. To what I've seen, you can tell when light shines in the darkness, it brightens up a place. And then in our second conversation, we were privileged to hear from Ryan Brock, who is living a different kind of a church plant, a different kind of a community. And so tonight I will invite Leslie, and I know the rest of the two different people have videos, but Leslie is just going to be doing some talking. And the idea is Leslie, I wouldn't tell you what Leslie will share, but I'll let Leslie share how they, as a church in a cornfield, I always say the best of all the brethren churches are in the cornfield because we love our cornfield somehow in the Midwest. So let me qualify it in the Midwest because out East Coast, your churches are not as in the cornfield like as we are here. So Leslie, over to you. You are our brethren parable for this month. And next month, I will be in conversation with Anton Eller. I'm just putting you on the spot now. so I can talk to you about being the parable, and you can share something or do a video in our next meeting.
Thank you. Okay, Polo Church of the Brethren is, as he said, a very small population church. We're in a community of 2,500. A lot of good work here. And I've been with them starting my 5th year. And the things that they wanted me to do was to get involved in the community, in the district, and I already was used to being very involved with the larger church from the state of Ohio. I have 24 years of experience as a pastor. So what we have done in the years I've been here is decide that we were going to work with new church plants. Instead of worrying about whether we actually grow our own church, we would grow other churches also and consider them a part of our church. So I became good friends with Samuel from the very beginning, and we have done several projects with him, and we make sure that their youth get to camp every year. I also have a young man who just graduated from Bethany, and he's been working alongside Samuel doing some creation care type stuff by starting a garden project with them this past summer, which was very successful. And Jonathan Stauffer is an amazing person in how he's growing. He does many things with me, but also with the Rockford Church. We also are a sister church with the Parables Project. And we love that church, and I believe they love us too. And we've gone and done worship with them, and they've come here and done worship alongside of me. We've worked in some of the things that they felt comfortable doing, and they've actually gotten up and helped me in the worship setting. And I love that they feel like they can come to our church and we can come and assist them where they are comfortable. I'm happy that our church feels like that is something that they want to put their funds into. And I'm hoping that the Illinois-Wisconsin district can see that as something that other churches should, quote, buy into. That even though they may come from a small rural area, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be looking to fund new starts in other areas and see that as a part of growing their own churches. Another thing we do is we run a secondhand rose store that started out of our church and is now funded by the Area Council of Churches, but all the sorting is done here at our church. And it is so that people who don't have their needs can still hold their heads up and go into a local store that's downtown and pay a very small price to get good quality things that people bring to us to sort through. And somehow we make it work that they can pay almost nothing and get some quality things and go out of there with their heads up and feel very blessed. And our newest projects are revitalizing the town. We're getting a store back after having not had a store where you can get fresh things since 2008. So the town council, we've worked very close with them. We're getting a store back because our town voted to give a couple of gentlemen a $30,000 loan out of love and trust that they could restart a store, and not a lot of people would be willing to do that. So we're going to restart the store, and a local businessman who, instead of screaming at our kids for skateboarding downtown all the time, they were getting in trouble all the time, he's tearing down several local places that needed to be rebuilt, and he's building a state-of-the-art skateboarding area right downtown Polo, and putting in a cafe and coffee shop, having someone come in to help build the facility that's going to be just like facilities that have been built in other areas that are thriving, and we can't be more excited. That will be good for our community, good for our youth, and I think it'll be good for area youth in the Dixon and Sterling area. It'll bring more people together. And those are the kind of things that our church in Polo are interested in doing, taking care of people who don't have places to go, bringing us downtown to talk to people who don't know about Jesus. And I don't know, I just feel like we have something to say to them. And we're very much into creation care, as you know, since we're the ones that brought the query. Jonathan has gotten the okay now to start something on our district website where churches can be linking in and sharing their stories about what they're doing, not only in their own homes, but what churches can be doing to look at their buildings, at their financial packages, to see what we can do to help God's creation and ourselves in just working at better ways to take care of all that God has put us in charge of. So I'm really excited about what we do, not only here in our little community, but in our district and with all of you. And I just think he is good to us all. And our jobs are full of challenges, but I think we're up to that. And especially in ways like this where we can talk and share with one another.
Thank you so much, Leslie.
You're welcome.
Yeah. You know, the concept, the theme, living parable, for me, it's something that drives home. Every church in our district, every little community can be a parable in their community.
Absolutely.
Hearing stories of Polo Church of the Brethren, a small church that is helping to spearhead a whole city's revitalization, a whole community transformation. Although the congregation started, we need to grow our church. Sometimes growing our church is not by a number of people we put on the pews in some, the number of people that fill our pews on Sunday, but is the light of Christ shining from our community and transforming the community that we live in. So my hope that as you hear stories of Leslie, of Brethren Housing Community, the City Church in Veritas, that it will spark some interest, some kind of curiosity.
Yes.
Spiritual curiosity, intellectual curiosity, that you can begin to look at your own community and say, oh, what are we doing that sometimes we get so used to what we're doing and it's making a difference, but we don't stand outside and look, and we don't tell our story to ourselves and to our hearers. So we begin to feel like we're not doing anything. We feel caught in a rut. But by hearing stories like this and the opportunity for you to share your story, it all of a sudden brings more life to the conversation. So that is why I'm intentional about having every town hall meeting that there is a Brethren parable. And you will see the outflow of that at conference as well. Every evening there will be a video about a Brethren parable, and it will go across the world to show what brethren are doing brethren are doing and what brethren are being Jesus to this challenging world that we live in. So I know we are close to the top of the hour. We have 8 more minutes left. So I want to open the discussion for any question, comments, just kind of general, or it might be related to this topic, or somebody has a question for any one of us that you can see on the screen, or for some on the phone. Roland, you are okay. Can you unmute yourself?
Okay, I can do that.
Yes, thank you.
Can you hear me now? Huh?
Yeah.
I was in listening to your story and stuff, and along with the scripture that we read. And historically, brethren haven't spoken very, very often about what we're doing and what we've done and how great we are. And I'm wondering, does that kind of relate to the parable? We're trying to put ourselves up at the top. And is that something we need to reconsider? Although I really like what you're doing. but that's just the question that popped in my head.
Yeah. My response to telling our story, I don't see it coming from a perspective of, here am I, an expert in this, but we're sharing what it means for us to be brethren in the local community of our calling. And this is how God is calling us to live out our life in this community, through supporting other projects, through helping to bring community transformation. And so for me, those are stories that you're telling because you are living out the story. This is who you are. This is being the parable that we are called to be in our own community. So when people in our community see us, we're not walking around and shouting from the rooftop, look at our achievement, but they look at what we're doing and they are able to say, when I read scriptures, I can testify there's a church down the road that reminds me of some of the stories of Jesus. And so that's kind of my take in this brethren parable, Brother Roland. I hope this is helpful.
Yeah, give me more to think about.
Yeah.
I guess I would just wanted to say too, I think too the way that we share is a big part of it. It's about, what God has called us to do, but what God's doing, And I think that just in the last several years of going to annual conference fairly regularly and things like that, we're all too willing to talk to one another about what we're worried about, or attendance is down, or this or that, or whatever it is. And I think it's really good to share when God's doing awesome stuff in different communities across the country. It's a really neat thing to, like, I would never have heard Leslie's story, right, outside of something like this. And that can then energize me in my own community to keep after whatever God's calling me to do here, just recognizing that he's faithful to bless what he's called Leslie to do where she is. And then, we're hearing all these different stories each time. And it's not braggadocio. It's God called me to this. I wasn't sure I could do it. I'm trying my best, and look at what he's doing as a result, and that all should energize us in whatever he's calling us to do wherever we are. So that's what I think it's about personally.
Thanks, Josiah.
And as we hear other people's stories about what is happening in their communities, it can challenge us to have a vision for what we can do where we are.
Thanks, Bruce. Colleen writes, or we extend an invitation to a person or group of persons that we find acceptable or welcome, but others at the party aren't welcome. Sometimes, if I'm going to make a commentary, so sometimes we extend invitation to only people we feel are welcome, and then we kind of put out those that are not welcome. So, but when we share stories like this, like Leslie's story, we realize that what the church called her, we want to grow our church. But here's what God is doing. God is growing the church in a different way, not in our own, attendance is down. But all of a sudden, our church is finding new life. And I tell you, our church has supported about 15 kids from my church to attend camp. And these are the kids that have never been outside of the city of Rockford. They grew up in a housing project. And right now, Leslie, you've seen some of them at our youth camp, and we're sending a bunch of them to NYC. And so it's because of efforts of churches like Polo, who is saying, we want to join God in what God is doing in our community. But actually what God is doing in our community might not be right within our vicinity. But God is calling us to support the youth program in Rockford, Illinois, support the program in the Parables. The Parables is, if you don't know about the Parable, is a brand new church plant that is catered for children with physical and disability. And for parents that have handicapped children, they can tell you going to a church on Sunday, it's the most challenging thing. Because they feel not welcome, because their kids are not developed according to the stage that every other child is. And so the child needs extra attention. And so this church plant in Illinois, Wisconsin district caters for special needs kids. If you don't know about them, and I'm not advertising for Parables, it's called Parables, Parables Community. It is pastored by Gene Davis. And it is a beautiful community just to see kids that have Down syndrome really passionate about worship in a way that it's beautiful. I've attended some of their program, and I just am humbled by the kind of ministry that God is calling us as a denomination in different communities to be a part of. Well, it's 8 o'clock. I just realized that. So at the top, now that we've come to the end, the top of the hour, I will still give us an opportunity to go around and say something that's really your take, something that you glean from this. You don't have to say it, you can just pass, or you can say something that really stands out for you as a highlight tonight. And yeah.
I was glad to hear more about the parables and have Bev share and Bruce and others. And I enjoy the Bible study together. We could have spent a lot more time on that.
Yeah.
And your questions started it out, Samuel.
Thank you.
I thank everybody for your support in calling in. I just think it's a really good thing to hear from everybody in the different areas. Thank you so much.
I'm grateful for Brother Samuel and the rest of you who are pulling this together for making this possible. It's a unique way of experiencing what is happening across the denomination in ways other than we're used to experiencing through our print media and some of the more traditional things. The face-to-face contact that we have here electronically, digitally, I'm finding very challenging, and I just want to say thanks to those of you that make this possible.
Thank you.
I'll piggyback on that. We really enjoyed seeing the faces of all of you and connecting this way. And I personally will carry with me, Samuel, your idea that you shared that somebody would read a parable and say, oh, the people at that church remind me of this parable. I think that's quite a testimony, and I appreciate that.
Okay, I know it's a little past the hour, so I will send you forth with God's peace in this season of Advent. Our next meeting together in this platform will be in January, but I will make sure that you get the announcement way ahead of time. It's kind of Thursday because Thursdays seem to be the in-between ideal period. So you'll get the next announcement, and then these videos will be posted as well. You can direct people to it, and you'll get a link from Newsline to announce when this video is ready to be posted. And I will be sending that out, and I really appreciate you signing in. And as you celebrate Advent, may the hopeful expectation that we have of Christ's peace and return be with you. Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Samuel.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. God bless.
God
Good
bless.
night.
Good to hear you, Funa.
Likewise, Anton. Nice seeing you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.